October 23, 1942. The Western Desert, El Alamein. Altitude 0. The air is thick with the metallic scent of diesel and the choking fine dust of the Sahara. In the heart of the cauldron, battered and running on fumes, lies the Italian Divisione Corazzata Ariete, a division famous for its furious, almost desperate bravery, yet constantly crippled by one fundamental agonizing flaw: logistics. Their tanks, the M1340s, are already outclassed. Their supply trucks, Fiat PA-38Rs, are temperamental, fragile workhorses designed for paved roads, not the brutal, endless dunes of North Africa. But tonight, a new sound cuts through the Allied barrage, a distinct, deep-throated rumble, an engine note that does not belong to the dusty, struggling Axis infantry. It is the sound of American steel, captured and repurposed. It is the sound of the Dodge WC-51. The Second World War is often framed by the drama of tanks and fighters, the Sherman versus the Tiger, the Spitfire versus the Messerschmitt. But the true story of victory, the invisible narrative of the conflict, was written in oil, gasoline, and spare parts. Irony is a cruel historian. Italy entered the war believing its imperial destiny would be secured by will and speed. Instead, its fate was decided by the brutal, crushing scale of American and British industrial output. This is the story of that fundamental contradiction, personified by a simple, rugged, four-wheel drive utility truck, a machine that offered Italian soldiers a fleeting, bitter taste of what it felt like to wage war without the constant, gnawing fear of mechanical failure. The Dodge WC series, a family of versatile military vehicles, was the backbone of Allied mobility. Mass-produced, rugged, and over-engineered, it was the antithesis of Italian wartime production. To the Allied soldier, it was merely a supply mule. To the Axis soldier, it became a prized trophy, a mechanical ghost offering salvation. We turn to the recollections of Sergente Maggiore Leonardo Moretti, a mechanic attached to a logistics unit of the Ariete. He describes the moment of their capture. "We found it after the skirmish, abandoned near the broken British column. Covered in sand, yes, but its chassis was solid. We dragged it back with a cable. I remember my hands on the wheel. It felt substantial, like a tool, not a toy. I opened the bonnet, the six-cylinder engine, the flathead. Simple, accessible, yet so clearly powerful. Our Fiats were built for sunshine and paved roads. This Dodge felt built for the end of the world." Moretti's description highlights the chasm in industrial philosophy. While Italian industry prized aesthetics and often struggled to scale robust designs, the US focused on ruthless, repeatable utility. The Dodge, with its 92 horsepower, 3.8-liter engine and durable transfer case, was a revolution to these men, accustomed to the delicate maintenance required by their domestic vehicles. Initially, there was suspicion. Could this alien machine be maintained? Did they have the tools? The answer, incredibly, was improvisation. Captured fuel, patched tires, and the sheer ingenuity of Italian mechanics kept these trophy trucks running. They were repainted in desert afar yellow-brown, obscuring the telltale olive drab. But the shape was unmistakable, boxy, aggressive, efficient. These captured Dodges, often carrying critical water, ammo, or even acting as makeshift officer transport, moved with a confidence that their native counterparts simply lacked. They became an emblem, a symbol of the division's desperate tenacity, and a testament to the undeniable, frightening power of the enemy. The Allies, meanwhile, didn't yet grasp the true desperation of their enemy. They assumed abandoned vehicles were simply destroyed or scavenged for parts. They failed to account for the meticulous, professional determination of the Italian mechanics to resurrect these machines and turn them against their original owners. The Ariete division would fight to its bitter end, its movements often sustained by the very vehicles it was meant to be fighting against. It is a story of human resourcefulness versus industrial scale, a narrative that will take us from the furnace of the desert to the desperate winter of the Italian homeland. The next chapter will detail the surprising tactical impact of the Dodge WC and the technical specifications that made it so indispensable. If you find this untold narrative of logistics and survival compelling, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to follow the full arc of the war's mechanical unsung heroes. The capture of an enemy vehicle is a temporary tactical boon. Its prolonged deployment is an industrial miracle. After El Alamein, as the remnants of the Axis forces retreated across North Africa, the need for reliable transport became a matter of survival, not strategy. And the star of this desperate logistical show was the captured Dodge. Let us examine the mechanics of admiration. The standard Italian Fiat SPA medium truck offered 60 horsepower and a payload of around 5 tons. The American Dodge WC-51 weapons carrier offered 92 horsepower, a standard payload of 75 tons, but crucially boasted a four-wheel drive system with a heavy-duty frame, a design optimized for aggressive off-road handling, not just payload volume. This technical advantage was not academic. It was the difference between delivering critical 47mm anti-tank rounds to the front line through soft sand or getting stuck and facing annihilation. The WC-51's open cab and robust construction allowed for rapid, field-expedient modifications. We have photographic evidence showing these captured Dodges adapted with Italian Breda machine guns, transformed from simple transports into fast, improvised reconnaissance and raiding vehicles. They could traverse terrain that bogged down every Italian and German wheeled vehicle short of a half-track. The sudden appearance of these familiar silhouettes in enemy colors began to sow a strange confusion in the Allied ranks. Captain Arthur Ace Vanning, an RAF pilot flying reconnaissance missions, documented this anomaly. It was unnerving. You'd be flying a sortie, looking for enemy columns, and you'd spot a perfect, boxy Dodge WC, exactly like the one that drove you to the airfield. But it was painted that awful dusty yellow. At first we thought it was a friendly column mistakenly reported. Then the realization would hit. They'd stolen our mules. It was an insult, a petty victory, but it meant they were keeping themselves alive with our equipment. A testament to their mechanical skill, I'll give them that. This confusion created small windows of opportunity for the Ariete reconnaissance teams, exploiting the moment of pilot doubt to slip through Allied detection. The greatest mechanical mystery was not how they drove them, but how they maintained them. The German Afrika Korps, notorious for its own logistical nightmares, was often impressed. Italian mechanics scavenged every wrecked American vehicle for parts, sometimes performing acts of mechanical alchemy. They learned to adapt metric tools to imperial bolts, converting Fiat gaskets to Dodge seals. A recurring issue was the US 6-volt electrical system versus the Axis 12-volt standard. They overcame this by dedicating precious captured batteries solely to the Dodge fleet, or in one recorded case, rewiring an entire vehicle to the Italian standard, a complex and time-consuming procedure done under constant threat of air attack. This wasn't merely resourcefulness, it was an act of worship toward a superior piece of technology. The paradox of the trophy truck deepened the despair of the Italian High Command. The success of the captured Dodges was a silent, damning indictment of the state of their own national industry. While the Italian soldier drove the captured American machine into battle, the political leadership in Rome continued to boast about autarkia, national self-sufficiency. The reality on the desert floor was that self-sufficiency was a lie. The only reliability they could count on often had the words "built in Detroit" stamped on its chassis plate. The trophy truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was a devastating psychological weapon, constantly reminding its drivers of their nation's industrial inferiority in the face of the oncoming storm. This realization would be the first domino to fall, leading to the desperate and confused strategic retreats that defined the last phase of the North African campaign. The logic of lubrication and logistics had proven more powerful than any fascist political ideology. By early 1943, the tide of the Desert War had turned into a relentless eastward surge. The Ariete division, shattered but not broken, was pushed into the final defenses in Tunisia. This phase of the war, often overshadowed by the major battles, was a brutal, extended logistical slog, a race against time where every working engine mattered more than every fighting infantryman. Imagine the scene: a convoy stretching across a moonless, bombed-out highway near the Mareth line. Mixed among the recognizable German Opel Blitz and Italian Lancia 3-row trucks are 3 or 4 distinctive boxy silhouettes, the American Dodges painted in dusty Italian camo. They are the pacemakers, the lifeline. Unlike their Axis brethren, which require frequent stops for cooling or carburetor adjustments in the fine sand, the Dodges press on. Beyond sheer power, the Dodge offered a critical advantage: its fuel efficiency and tolerance for lower-grade fuel. Its low-compression straight-six engine was less thirsty than the high-strung, high-maintenance V configurations common in German and Italian designs. In a campaign constantly plagued by fuel shortages, often causing the abandonment of perfectly good tanks, the Dodge's endurance was a tactical asset. A captured Dodge could cover 20% more ground on the same allocation of captured Allied gasoline than a comparable Italian vehicle could on its own supply. Sergente Maggiore Moretti details the desperate measures taken to keep his fleet running. "We ran out of almost everything. Oil, proper oil, was a dream. We would filter and reuse engine oil, blending it with whatever lubricant we could find, sometimes even low-grade vegetable oil taken from abandoned farms. The Fiat would choke and die. The Dodge? It complained, yes, you could hear the bearings weeping, but it would keep going. It was a beast. It forgave your neglect. It was the only thing standing between us and being stranded to be captured." The captured trucks served another, more chilling purpose: confusion and psychological warfare. In the chaotic, swirling retreats, Axis reconnaissance teams occasionally used the Dodges to penetrate deeper into Allied-held territory. The Allies had a system of identification. But in the dark, in the dust, the silhouette of a truck speeding past, a friendly shape, caused a moment of fatal hesitation in sentries and patrols. The enemy was using the symbol of Allied strength as a Trojan horse. This strategy culminated in Tunisia, where Axis forces, desperate for intelligence, used these Trojan Dodges to gather information on Allied build-ups before the final surrender. While the numbers of captured vehicles were small, perhaps a few hundred across all theaters, their impact was disproportionate. They were not evenly distributed, but concentrated in elite, mobile, or specialized units, like the Ariete's reconnaissance and maintenance wings. Every Dodge running meant a superior vehicle, performing a critical task, freeing up the less reliable native trucks for less demanding roles. The mechanical alchemy of retreat had transformed a liability, scarcity, into a temporary precious asset, reliability. The true scale, however, lies in the sheer volume of Allied production they were fighting against. By 1943, the US was churning out vehicles at a rate that dwarfed the combined Axis output, a flood against a dwindling trickle. The captured Dodge was merely a spoonful of water, taken from an ocean of American industrial might, yet for the soldiers who depended on it, it was everything. The mechanical miracle was running out of time. The retreat was approaching the Mediterranean Sea. The fate of the Ariete and its precious fleet of trophy trucks would soon be sealed. April 1943. The curtain falls on the North African campaign with a deafening thud. The remaining Axis forces, battered and defeated, face a harrowing choice: surrender in the desert or gamble on a desperate sea evacuation across the Mediterranean. But this was no orderly retreat. It was a surgical selection. The Italian High Command, grasping for any shred of operational capability, prioritized the most valuable assets, and right alongside the coveted German 88mm guns and functional tanks were the best-maintained captured American vehicles. They were too precious, too reliable, to be left for the advancing Allied salvage teams. They were, in essence, war reparations paid in advance by the enemy itself. The journey across the sea was itself a gauntlet of Allied air and naval supremacy. Yet, when these patched, sun-baked Dodges finally rolled off the landing ramps in Palermo and Naples, the sight was a profound shock. To the populace and the command staff who had remained stateside, these desert-worn vehicles, still bearing the unmistakable silhouette of American design beneath hastily applied Italian camo, were more than just trucks. They were symbols of a distant, lost war, stark reminders of the industrial gap and the imminent danger. They were the only reliable transport available for the immediate, urgent task, defending the Italian homeland against the inevitable Allied landing. The Ariete Division, reformed and re-equipped with whatever could be scraped together, found its operational lifeline still tied, impossibly, to its scavenged American fleet. The environment had changed drastically. The battle was no longer against the consuming sand, but against the treacherous, tight-winding mountain roads and the constant, crushing omnipresence of Allied air superiority, a threat that made the Dodge's superior speed and durability an existential necessity. July 10th, 1943. Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily, begins. This volcanic island, rugged and riddled with deep ravines and small, unreliable bridges, was the Dodge WC-51's ultimate proving ground. The vehicle's 4x4 capability, which was a strategic luxury on the flat, hard-packed desert, became an absolute necessity on the dirt tracks and broken infrastructure of the Sicilian interior. Its clearance and robust axles allowed it to bypass main roads, which were constantly targeted by Allied bombers, while the cumbersome two-wheel-drive Italian Lancia 3-row and German heavy trucks were reduced to slow, predictable targets. The Dodges were the nimble arteries of the quick-reaction groups, crucial for delivering command teams, signals equipment, and, most crucially, ammunition where it was needed instantly. The maintenance challenge reached its critical, unsustainable zenith. In North Africa, every wrecked Allied vehicle was a potential goldmine of parts. In Sicily, there were no more easily scavenged wrecks. Every broken spring, every ruptured oil seal, forced the mechanics into a desperate, almost alchemical form of fabrication. Capitano Emilio Rossi, the divisional maintenance officer, recounted this grinding psychological and technical battle. It became an obsession, a type of mechanical illness. The American standard bolt threads, the specific alloys, everything was unobtainable. Every screw, every piece of sheet metal was more precious than gold. Our highest joy was perverse. The moment a part broke in a way that permitted us to improvise a repair from local materials. I once personally supervised a mechanic who used a coil of reclaimed telephone wire and melted lead, salvaged from pipework, to seal a crack in the radiator. We kept those Dodges running not with spare parts, but out of sheer, blinding, stubborn professional pride. They represented the last vestige of our ability to move freely, to fight with any semblance of modern mobility. This desperation fueled feats of legendary battlefield service. Near Mount Etna, during the brutal push by the British 8th Army, an Italian 75mm artillery battery was pinned down, its guns virtually silent, critically low on shells. Every minute counted as Allied tanks prepared their final assault. The battery's salvation arrived not in a tracked vehicle, but in a single, fast-moving Dodge WC-51. Ignoring waves of heavy shelling that tore up the ground around it, the truck, loaded far past its nominal rating, its leaf springs groaning, bounced violently across the rough, lava-strewn terrain. It delivered the final, life-saving box of ammunition. The guns fired, silencing the immediate threat and holding the line. The trophy truck, in that single critical run, made the difference between holding a position and a catastrophic collapse. Yet this reliability was a deadly paradox for the men who ensured it. The mechanics, often forced to work on the exposed, broken-down vehicles, engine hatches open, tools spread, became priority targets for Allied fighter bombers, the dreaded Jabos. For these dedicated repair crews, the Dodge WC was both a lifesaver and a deadly beacon, its distinctive silhouette drawing enemy fire like a magnet. The men who kept the machines running, working under impossible deadlines and constant exposure, often suffered casualties far greater than the combat crews who drove them. The battle for Sicily was ultimately and quickly lost. As Axis forces prepared for the final humiliating retreat across the Strait of Messina, the painful decision had to be made: abandon the captured trophies to the advancing enemy, or risk a perilous crossing. Most were destroyed, deliberately driven into the sea or set ablaze, to prevent them from falling back into Allied hands and completing the cycle. But a precious few, the absolute best of the fleet, made the crossing. They carried with them not just men and material, but the final desperate hope of a defeated, fractured army. The war moved north, up the spine of the Italian peninsula. The final agonizing acts of the trophy truck's story played out in the desperate, grinding attrition of the Gustav and Gothic lines. Here in the Italian winter, amidst the mud, snow and unforgiving cold, the four-wheel drive capability of the Dodge WC proved its ultimate worth, navigating mountainous terrain that choked and defeated heavier, more complex German and Italian designs. They were the dependable mules carrying the weight of a dying war. Then came the seismic historical shift. With the Italian armistice of September 1943, the political landscape shattered, and the tactical situation flipped one final dramatic time. The captured Dodges suddenly found themselves aligned, politically and operationally, with their original manufacturers. Those vehicles that escaped destruction, now considered prize assets by the Allies, were quickly integrated into the supply and support units of the newly formed Italian co-belligerent army, fighting against the remaining German occupiers. This was irony's crowning achievement, its most devastating blow. The very vehicles that had once strained to sustain the Axis defense in the desert were now helping to drive the final, painful wedge into the German occupation of Italy. They returned to their intended purpose, logistics and mobility, but now driven by men whose allegiance had changed, yet whose fundamental, grudging admiration for the machine remained absolute. The Ghost of Detroit had become a reluctant but essential ally. The story of the trophy truck is a profound and fundamental lesson in the nature of modern industrial warfare. The war was not won solely by the brilliance of a single prototype weapon, the Tiger or the Me-262, but by the overwhelming, crushingly superior power of mass-produced reliability. The Dodge WC, the ubiquitous, simple weapons carrier, was the physical embodiment of the assembly line's power. It taught the Axis forces a painful truth. A nation that can produce millions of simple, dependable and interchangeable trucks is a nation that possesses a logistical backbone that cannot be defeated by courage or tactical genius alone. After the guns fell silent, the impact of these American designs fundamentally and forever changed the European automotive industry. Dr. D. Vittorio Valenti, a young engineer who dedicated his post-war career to developing new vehicles for Fiat, encapsulated the sentiment shared across the continent. The Dodge, the Jeep, the GMC, these weren't merely war trophies or relics. They were our postgraduate education in utility vehicle design. We studied them meticulously, not as artifacts of a defeated enemy, but as a superior industrial template. We saw the standardized, interchangeable axles, the rugged, easily repairable suspensions, the philosophy of over-engineering for simplicity and speed of repair. Our post-war designs, notably the robust, successful Fiat Campagnola, were fundamentally influenced by the American utility vehicle model. It was a humiliating lesson in industrial capacity, yes, but it was an absolutely necessary one for Europe to learn. The Italian military, rebuilding its forces in the late 1940s and 1950s, standardized its vehicle concepts entirely on the principles pioneered by the very American machines they had so desperately needed to steal. The Ghost of Detroit had become the definitive blueprint for the future of European motorized armies. From the swirling, choking dust of El Alamein, across the perilous waters of the Mediterranean, and finally through the muddy, snow-swept passes of the Gothic line, the trophy truck was a constant, dependable presence. It was the mechanical symbol of an empire's ambition, Italian ambition, running headlong into the cold, hard, unstoppable reality of American industrial capability. For the men of the Ariete, it was far more than a truck. It was a means of survival, a testament to their own mechanical ingenuity, and a daily, grinding reminder of the impossible odds stacked against them. The Dodge WC may have been a minor component in the grand strategy of the Second World War, but for the Italian mechanics and soldiers who relied on its unexpected, enduring durability, it was, quite simply, the defining difference between life and death. The trophy truck's engine long ago fell silent, its metal slowly consumed by time and rust, but its legacy is indelibly etched into the very soil of North Africa and the roads of Italy. It is a story not of grand strategy or glorious battles, but of the unsung essential drama of logistics and the profound, humbling and enduring power of American industrial might. If you want to uncover more untold stories of the logistical battles and mechanical legends that truly defined the Second World War, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments which forgotten machine we should cover next.